believe we're about to go into the golden age of America?
I do. There is a huge revival happening with Gen Z right now.
Dude, what's up with you and Candace Owens? You guys got a baby, you got more sassy. These professors hate you. Not you, professor, I love you.
No, my professors are great.
Did you learn anything from school when you were dealing with the trauma that you could bring to the table to teach us how to behave in a more loving way with these people that are broken?
If I've learned anything over the past few years, especially leaning into this professionally, if you're going to speak the truth to a world that is rejecting that very concept, you're guaranteed to be hated, because ultimately truth has a name, and that name is Christ.
I'm just praying, I don't fight, I just pray. I only go the way of mistake.
That's lovely, George. I love it. A real gift to be around.
Yeah, that was awesome.
That's a very good question.
I love you guys.
You've given me something to think about.
Going for a lot of outlets.
We're good to go.
Okay, cool. Well, we had so many technical difficulties. I am so sorry for that.
Oh my gosh, story of my life. Please do not apologize.
You're from Arizona.
Well, not originally. I lived here for a few years, but I'm from Colorado. That's where I grew up. Mountain girl at heart. That will always be home.
Very outdoorsy.
Oh yeah, nature granola girl through and through.
Honestly, the way that you've been talking about this country, I feel like you're about to go back into the wilderness and just stay in there for a bit.
Honestly, nothing would make me happier than having like a full-scale ballerina farm moment. I think eventually my husband and I will get there. Right now, work's taking us in some really spectacular places, so we'll see.
You just had an amazing surprise, so congratulations on being pregnant.
Thank you. The bump is out in full force. Not hiding it anymore. The number of people who were so on to me the last several months being on other people's podcasts, because I would wear big drapey shirts and trying not to look too bloated. You guys all figured it out, okay? You were right. Yes, I'm pregnant.
But I mean, you're so tiny though. You're just little. You have a little beautiful
fun.
bump.
It is very fun. Over halfway. I'm 24 weeks this week already. Crazy.
I have to say, it's kind of like when you're a kid, you know that females hold a baby, but I think when you're an adult and you get married and you're like talking about having kids one day, or you talk to friends that have literally a human being in your body, what does it feel like? Do you feel like actually different knowing that there's a body? Like, do you go into more like mama bear mode, like seatbelts are always on, no better be able to look at me that way? Like, do you have
kind of? I think that'll come more when she's here probably, and when she's born. But yeah, I feel totally different, which is amazing and frustrating and challenging at certain times. But I talk a lot about pregnancy, and I'm a very vocal pro-life advocate. I studied to be a physician. That was ultimately my dream before God threw me in a totally different direction. So have studied the science behind this for a long time. But I think there's something so unexplainable about what it's like to feel your child moving inside of you. It's literally impossible to explain, but it's beautiful. It's spectacular.
Are you gonna ease back on your aggressiveness, or do you think you'd tap into it more?
Way more.
Dude, what's up with you and Candace Owens? It's like you guys got a baby, you got out more sassy, and you're just ready to go.
It's way more exciting. No, I think it just gave me so much more perspective on why I do what I do, right? I am a bunch of different types of a commentator. I really started in the political world specifically, have evolved much more into the cultural and religious space over the last few years. Getting engaged and getting married made me totally fall in love with speaking out about the family, but having this new life that I'm responsible for, and particularly a young woman in this world that can't even answer the question what a woman is, has really motivated and inspired me to be more outspoken.
Dude, that's awesome. I mean, I think that the family nature is under attack, and I think people that really believe in the biblical sense of a mother and a father raising a kid, I think they just want to stand up and say, hey, you guys can't shut us down because we believe in this. Mm-hmm. And I was doing some research, and I don't know if this is true, but is it true that you were threatened a lot? So that's why I asked you if you're gonna go full force, because usually my mom would be like, I'm gonna pipe down for a bit until this baby's 18 and then I'm gonna go crazy. Yeah. But you're like, no, I'm gonna go full force. Do you ever get worried about the backlash falling onto your kid one day?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think to some extent it kind of has already begun with the announcement publicly that we're pregnant. You should read some of my DMs and comments on TikTok and Instagram, which I was expecting. Certainly much more positive than negative, which has been phenomenal. But I learned really early on in the social media space that a lot of what you do when you speak the truth is going to be accompanied by extreme hatred. And I found that out as a college student, well before I wanted to do this professionally. I mentioned I was pre-med actually in college. My dream was to be a trauma surgeon. I had no realm of concept of wanting to work in media or as an influencer. I hate that word, influencer. I say content creator now. But found out really quickly that on my huge college campus of 33,000 students, there really wasn't anyone, no professor, no student, no organization sharing my values publicly and outspoken. So if nobody else was going to do that, I was going to have to do that. And I told that story a million times on other podcasts, which I'm sure people can go find, but really experienced the backlash very, very quickly of being sort of public enemy number one. People started calling me anti-woman, transphobic, homophobic, racist. Somebody put up flyers in our student center when I was in college calling me white supremacist Barbie or Hitler Youth Barbie. Which
I get that one. I get that one. Yeah, I get that one. That one makes sense to me.
To being outspoken. But I wasn't saying anything particularly controversial. I was advocating for free speech and limited government and free markets on a large public federally funded college campus. And especially in my classes related to the sciences, it was just shocking to me that when I'm supposed to be learning about cellular biology or how cancer works or human gross anatomy, I'm instead being taught by my professors that abortion doesn't end the life of a genetically unique human being, which we just spent 9 months talking about in our classes over the last 2 semesters. Or, hey, it's impossible. This was actually a real question I got on an exam. It's impossible that God could have created the universe at all. Had to be spontaneous, which was insane to me, right? So I just wanted to start a conversation and a dialogue, which obviously very quickly was accompanied by some of that hatred, and that escalated as we brought some conservative speakers to my college campus, right as that was becoming a mainstream trend and with the rise of Antifa. But if I've learned anything over the past few years, especially leaning into this professionally, if you're going to speak the truth to a world that is rejecting that very concept, you're guaranteed to be hated because ultimately truth has a name, and that name is Christ.
Amen. 100%. You said you wanted to start dealing with trauma. Have you ever kind of thought that, like, you kind of still are? Like, you deal with people that are dealing with some type of trauma and they feel that they want to speak their voices out. Do you feel like we should be doing a better job? And I'm not saying you, but I'm saying all of us. Do you think we should be doing a better job realizing that they're hurt and broken and, like, trying to do what Christ did when he came and just asked them questions and not really pointed a finger and or too much of like a mockery? Now, I'm not saying you do, but I'm saying our field of things, like when people are like, oh, he's what do they call me? A drifter. And they say, oh, he's with the right. I'm not with anybody. I'm with Christ. So like, there's a lot of people that agree with me on this side of things and on that side of things. But I'm kind of like heartbroken that a lot of Republicans take the punching down method.
Yeah.
And if I'm going to enter the realm of being on top of the team with these people from like the Daily Wire, or Jordan Peterson, or all these people that are like-minded with my views, I do want to bring to the table is like, hey, dude, remember, we only have wisdom because Jesus poured it into us. And if there's a Bible verse that scares me. It says, the measurement that you measure others, I will measure you. And so I see a lot of people fighting for the truth, but they're doing it in such a disrespectful, disabling way that it's like, if Jesus had that same mindset with us, we would be tarnished. We wouldn't even be here. So I wanted to take a step back and say, like, did you learn anything from school when you were dealing with the trauma that you could bring to the tables for podcasters or anybody on this side of things to teach us how to behave in a more loving way with these people that are broken?
That's been such a powerful journey for me to navigate as an individual over the past few years. I mentioned I kind of started in commentating strictly politically, and that was after in college I did an internship for the U.S. Senate and then for the White House with the Trump administration last time. Did a ton of work. It was amazing. It was very cool. I'm sure we'll get into all of it. I'm very excited for them to be back in Washington in just a couple days, but really love politics. I mean, I was competitive speech and debate queen at my high school. I went to nationals a few times for that. My parents are both Catholic lawyers, so we spent a long time talking about politics and religion as a kid.
Are you Catholic or Christian?
I am Catholic.
Okay,
yes.
cool. Okay.
A Catholic Christian is a good answer to that question in specifics, but I'm sure we'll get into some of that. But I love politics. I could talk about what Congress is debating on the floor of the Senate versus who's running for president until the cows come home. I will never get bored of that. But I realized pretty quickly in the first few years of doing this, working with pretty much every political commentating and media organization in the space, Turning Point USA, I do a lot of work in the pro-life movement. I've been a guest on most of the Daily Wire shows, if not all of them, up to this point over the past few years. There is that combative, own the libs nature that has worked really, really well in the last few years of American politics for millennials. It seemed sort of generationally, millennials needed somebody to beat them over the head and say, no, facts don't care about your feelings. This is real and this is fake. And we needed that hard line, almost adversarial politics to get people's attention. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I think people like Ben Shapiro, for example, have done a phenomenal job with this over the past 10 years or so, particularly coining that phrase, facts don't care about your feelings. But I am the first year of Gen Z. I was born in 1997. And watching my younger siblings go through all of this and the generational shift that I experienced on my college campus by the time I left, it became incredibly obvious to me that how this generation communicates is dramatically different from the millennial perspective.
In which way?
We are a feelings first generation. And you can blame that on a million different things. And you can say that's a good thing or a bad thing. It probably is attributed to all of the SEL, social emotional learning classes we took growing up.
I just think
100%.
they didn't let them feel pain.
That
I think that the whole, like, everybody deserves a trophy. Like,
I would attribute that more to millennials.
Really?
Than Gen Z. Yeah, I think Gen Z was encouraged really to tap into our feelings and to explain them. Like when I was a really, really young child, it was a bit of an alternative learning environment at my school, but we had something called the peace rose, for example. If you got in trouble and you were in a fight with somebody else at school, you had this plastic fake flower that you were supposed to pass back and forth. And if you were holding it, it was like the talking stick. You get the chance to talk and express your feelings and describe how that made you feel. And then you hand it back to them and you're supposed to navigate all of this stuff.
Yeah, those kids got beat up when I was growing up.
Every feeling is validated.
Pretty much, yeah. And there was definitely a hyperbolic, extreme version of that I think most people in our generation faced. But even if it's boiling it down to something as simple as you can call pretty much anyone on any facet of the globe instantaneously and you feel intimately connected to everyone else in humanity, I think we're really tapped into our feelings as Generation Z in a way millennials really weren't. They needed to be beat over the head with this is real and this is fake. So I've really spent the last 2 years or so expanding my content and expanding what I talk about to be so much bigger than politics, because really how you change politics and how you impact the policy side of things starts with seeing where people are at in their everyday life. And I think it's undoubtable to have this conversation that young people in particular in our country are really broken. We have been broken for a long time because we've been fed this cultural narrative that's really a lie on a silver platter. What's going to make us happy? What's going to make us fulfilled? What's going to bring joy into our lives? And then we get there and we're miserable. We're broken. We're facing a mental health crisis unlike anything the world has ever seen. So we're forgetting how to communicate the feelings part when it comes to the political side and the policy side. Feelings matter because they connect us to other human beings. God gave them to us for a reason, to be made in his image. And I think ultimately, if we can learn how to communicate in that facet and come to people where they are at, where they are broken, to address their trauma, so to speak, as you mentioned, that's such a more powerful way to help people realize why policy matters too.
Yeah, I think it was just like when I took a step back, I would hang myself out to dry. I had so many times I had to pray and ask for forgiveness because not anything I said, but the things that I thought.
Yeah.
And it's very filled with hypocrisy when I ask a loving God to forgive me for my sins, but then I look at somebody else and I'm like, this guy needs to get off the planet. Like the ability that the media is so powerful at dividing.
Yeah.
And there was a place in the gospel where they were saying that Jesus was serving a demon and casting out demons. And he made it very clear. He goes, a demon cannot cast out a demon, and a house that is divided cannot stand. And I do think that there's a problem with social media with everybody having their own echo chambers of their own thoughts. And it's just like, before it was like, oh, I think I'm right. Now it's like, oh, now I know I'm right because there's a million people that agree with me this way. And now we're building that, like, these little camps and little gangs of people that are like, oh, I believe in this. And if you don't believe, I mean, you think about even Christianity. Yeah. Christianity is such a one that I grew up with because you could believe one tradition and then one aspect is gone. Then you're like, whoa, buddy, that's completely wrong.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so, like, how do we get to a place where, and this is like a deeper thought, how do we get to a place where we could fix our trauma first? So that way we could even fix their trauma.
Well, that's the gazillion-dollar question, first and foremost. If I had an answer, I'm sure we wouldn't need to be doing podcasts like this. But I think it really starts with understanding we as a society, and by extension, individuals in our society, have really pushed God away. We've said that we are the God of our own lives. And ultimately, I think it's obvious we worship ourselves in many ways.
We're very selfish.
In our culture. We're incredibly selfish, and I would even argue narcissistic, almost out of like an overcorrection of what hyper-individualism is supposed to be in Western civilization. I said this the other day in a separate conversation, but individualism in and of itself is not bad. That's actually a virtuous thing for society. And I think over the past several thousand years, we've seen humanity flourish because of individual rationality and thought and education and ideas starting to thrive. It's really what built the West. But by now, in 2025 America, we've pushed so far into hyper-individualism that we've forgotten about that community aspect, about our shared humanity, about what binds us as people and our obligations to each other. And I think because of that, we feel incredibly alone. I mean, most of our mental health issues that we deal with today deal with extreme loneliness and anxiety and depression because of that. 1 in 3, I found this out the other day, teenage girls in America in 2021 seriously contemplated taking her own life. 1 in 3, which was shocking to me because up till now, most of the mental health issues teenage girls have dealt with have been clustered. You have cluster suicides, you have cluster eating disorders like anorexia and bulimia. You saw that all throughout the 90s and early 2000s. Now it's such a profound isolation and loneliness that you think the world would just be better if I wasn't here. And I think that can be applied to every single demographic in society, not just teenage girls, but that's really where this conversation has to start, is that we can't live on our own. We can't worship ourselves. We have this extreme hunger for something bigger than ourselves, and we're trying to fill that void with a million different things: job promotions, designer labels, 1 million followers on social media, and going viral and owning everybody, political power, you name it. That void of God that exists in our society today is how we got here. And I think the biggest way we can learn to bring our echo chambers together and bring us towards a more sustainable future is by returning back to Him.
100%.
I think that's really thoughtful. But so what do you think differentiated you? Because you're from that generation, right? So how did you go into college and you feel like you didn't get influenced by what all your peers were thinking? How did you stand your ground?
Well, I'm the oldest of 3 daughters and was very much trained early in life to express my opinion, even if it wasn't very popular. Lawyer parents will do that to you, I think, especially when they force you to join the speech and debate team in high school. I can't even begin to tell you how many arguments I had with my mom and dad as a teenager. And we would get into it and we would be debating each other. And my mom actually was one of my part-time speech and debate coaches. And so way back when as a teenager, we would be going at it and I'd say, "You forced me to do this. You trained me. You can't be mad at me for making a good point in this
As you're hovering over her panting.
My poor dad was always like, "Okay, I'll see you guys later."
He's holding the rose. He's like, "Guys, this isn't working."
So I do think part of it is personality, but a lot of that I think is accompanied by our society starting to gravitate towards this point of waking up and realizing what we are doing is not working. It is broken. I was incredibly fortunate to see that, probably from wisdom from God. I don't know where else that could have come from at an earlier time, a few years before most of our generation has. But look what happened just a few months ago with the 2024 election. Young people are overwhelmingly shifting the pendulum back in the other direction from wokeism and this societal relativism, moral relativism, and the emptiness that I think we've seen for so long. That's not just accompanied with political change, but religious change too. There is a huge revival happening with Gen Z right now, and I think we as an entire generation are learning how to say, you know, I know we've done it this way for a while, but this isn't working. So what do we need to do to change it?
I was literally sitting here meditating on that thought, and I was like, well, how did this happen? And I think what happens is the scripture says that everything that they intended for bad, He can make for good for His glory. So when they wanted everybody to be independent and have your own thoughts and be woke and make sure your feelings they matter, and they sent out all these agents of solo operatives.
Which ironically ended up creating a monolith, right? They said it was freeing your mind and thinking individually and being just you and so unique.
Until you think differently.
And then,
I think it truly, out of any generation and any time and any facet, it could be television, it could be a phone, and it could be a schooling system, and it could be anything at all. If the parents aren't hands-on with the kids, the home is going to be broken. At least teach your kids some type of values.
Yeah.
And in an Assyrian culture, I'm an Assyrian man. If I was running around at a picnic and Assyrian kids, right? And if somebody else's parents saw me do like bad things, they would discipline me. And the parents would thank them, be like, oh, thank you, he was wrong. You get what I'm saying? Now kids, they're not even getting disciplined by their own parents, and they're running out and causing so much problems in this world. I think if we wanted our country to get back to some type of sanity where we're not divided and angry, because people say like, well, everybody has their own point of views, but that's what America was built on. We had people from Poland, Japan, China, like everybody's ethnicities came here, and we didn't punch down or get angry or say, wow, you can't believe in that or this and that. I think it just comes down to respecting your neighbor. Like, even if we don't agree with what they're believing, I think we just draw the line. It's like, you can't indoctrinate our kids. Like, you cannot teach my kids what I want to teach them. You can't. I'm going to teach them their values, and you teach your kids your values.
Yeah.
And I just don't know how to get there on a whole country basis.
Well, I think we absolutely are moving in that direction. And ultimately, the last few years, it's largely been parents of young children who have drawn the line, especially post-COVID, and said, no, we're done. I think, if anything, COVID did one really, really good thing in the midst of all of the darkness, and it pulled back the curtain for the education system in America. And for the very first time, a lot of these parents who were very hands-off and weren't very involved in their children's lives saw what their teachers, the teachers that they were expecting, were raising their children with strong values and a good education. They saw what was happening in their child's classroom, and it revealed so much. I mean, you often hear these crazy stories on social media about the 4th grade furry who's using the litter box in the corner of the classroom. That's actually literally not hyperbolic. Like, that's actually taking place in Utah, of all places.
How did we get here? I couldn't even go to the bathroom. I went to
no bathroom pass for you, but here's a litter box.
I'm not even exaggerating. They knew that I would wander. I had ADHD, so in the schools they had these paintings that all the kids did, and I was like blown away. Some was ass, some was really good. I was just sitting there, and like time would pass, and they're like, George, we forbid you to go to the bathroom.
Oh yeah,
and so I had to hold it until passing period. Now they have a box where you can pee into dirt. That's
literally
crazy.
And you have to call children by like animal pronouns, just the most outrageous things. So as a result, I think parents have said, you know, I'm actually not okay with my kid engaging in this type of behavior or dialogue at school. I'm not okay with you mandating that I put some experimental injection into their arm, actually, until we know a little bit more about that in a few months, at the very least, just to have an honest conversation about it. I'm really not okay with you saying it's okay for my child to change their entire identity at school and then lie to me about it as their parent, which is very, very commonplace in most of these school districts across the country. Your kid is encouraged to change their pronouns and their name and everything about them at school, and they don't have to call home and tell the parents about it, which is just outrageous. So you're seeing this crazy reality bubble to the surface because that curtain was pulled back and young parents have said enough. But I think ultimately what this has been a huge wake-up call for me about is to be able to zoom out and ask, how did we get here? Like an honest question. How on earth did we let things get this bad? Because I think if you ask our parents' generation and those who maybe came right before us, they would have never told you this was going on. They would have had no idea that this was going on. But this isn't an overnight change. These are seeds that have been planted for decades and decades and decades and decades to go from you can't go use the bathroom at school because you're going to wander to, hey, it's totally fine to wear this BDSM animal costume to your high school and we'll respect your need to use a litter box in the classroom. So I've been really astounded to do a deeper dive on research of this to know that this was a premeditated plan. Actually, way back in the 1950s and 60s, you can find documentation in the federal government archives of the American Communist Political Party reading into the congressional records on the House floor of the U.S. House of Representatives, their goals for how to transform America and essentially overturn the entire society that we call the United States and Western civilization. And all of these things line up perfectly. Take over the newspapers to start promoting socialist propaganda instead of actual current events and inject an ideology into that. Take over classrooms and strengthen the teachers' unions so that we can push more of an insane ideology instead of teaching your kids math, and push socialist ideas and Marxist ideas. Destroy the value of the family and make it easier for people to get divorced, make them not want to have children, and push propaganda of degeneracy and cheating on each other in marriage instead of strengthening the value of the family. They have a list of like 100 goals that they read into the House of Representatives record. And I think ultimately all of that worked together to undermine the social contract of what we call the West, Western civilization, that's primarily based on the family. And that's why you've seen such a massive decline in marriage rates and fertility birth rates in our country more than anything else in the last several decades.
Do we know why? Like, who were those people that came together and were like, we need to push these socialist agendas?
That was actually quite literally a list given by the American Communist Political Party to the United States government, read into public record, and it's been out there since the 50s or 60s. I had no idea this was even a thing until I was at a fundraiser about a year ago with PragerU, who I've been incredibly fortunate to do some great work with over the years, and was just astounded when I did the deep dive. But you know, we can talk about the political implications of that all day long. I think if you view this through the lens of spiritual warfare, it's incredibly obvious to me that Satan has an agenda in our world. And when the family, that is the strongest possible governing unit ever established by God from the beginning of humanity's origins, is undermined, havoc is just wreaked in society. And when we got to this point where right now we have the lowest marriage rate in American history, ever since we began recording them in the 1860s, I believe it was 1867. And we have a 100-year low fertility rate in America, not just because people can't have children, which is certainly an alarming concern, but way more often than not, just because people are choosing not to have them. Like 70% of millennials, I read a study about this the other day, would prefer to have pets instead of children. They just think it's easier, it's better for their lifestyle, it doesn't ruin their job prospects or their personal life or vacation, and so they don't want to have children.
I see a lot of people that treat their animals like their kids.
Fur babies.
Like, look, he gets that from me. You ever see that?
It's back to that.
He gets that from me. I'm like, dude, he's a dog.
And when you get rid of the family, it's so much easier to control people because you're lonely, you're isolated, you're miserable.
Well, the house is divided.
You're looking for meaning. The house is divided. And all of a sudden, you take your social cues not from a trusted advisor and best friend and partner in your spouse or a long-term relationship or your children. You take it from the government or your teachers or your professors or the media or the entertainment industry.
Don't like how you pointed
which
at me
is
when you said
precisely
She's like,
precisely how this has happened and how we've gotten here by now.
I got a question then. So if we see the declining of schooling being actually more educational than it is like having an agenda, do you see the future being more of like a Dr. Jordan Peterson effect where it's like, we're going to actually create our own university. You can pay online, but do you think that there's going to be variations of that? Or do you think that colleges are just going to get cleaned up and get back to where they should be?
Both, probably. Although I'm a bit of a pessimist when it comes to the university system, which is incredibly ironic.
So long. What did you go for again? I can't even say it.
I went for undergrad to Colorado State University, where I grew up, for biomedical sciences. Then I went to grad school at Georgetown in D.C. It's a very long name for biomedical.
Are you a scientist?
Yeah, biomedical sciences, policy, and advocacy, basically like healthcare law, which was fascinating doing that in 2020, by the way. Lots of good stories.
So then what's your opinion on Luigi?
Oh, we don't need to get into all of that very complicated business. I'm actually back in school now. I started in May at the University of Notre Dame.
No.
I'm getting my master's in theology, which is more of a pet project.
How is this even happening? How are you saying, nah, this is not good, but I'm enrolling? Do you have like, by the way, like, do they know that you're coming and that you hate them? And
I don't hate the university system at its face.
How did you get accepted?
I'm very clear about this.
I couldn't even get accepted, and I didn't say anything bad about college.
I do speak out a lot about the indoctrination on campuses, and these people know that, and they've been incredibly accommodating for that.
So you want your future daughter, do you want her to go to college?
It depends on what she wants to do with her life. I think there are still degrees that hold substantial value that you do need to truly become educated in your field. I wanted to be a doctor. You obviously can't go to medical school without a bachelor's degree, and that was incredibly important education. I think STEM as a whole really holds a lot of value still. Engineering. Construction management has some great projects, including at my alma mater, Colorado State. But ultimately, if you're going to college to study underwater lesbian basket weaving, there's nothing positive for you in the world. I mean, you laugh. I'm probably sure that's a degree somewhere or a class at the very least.
You're studying theology, which is such a, I mean, in a liberal, campus kind of university. How did you find the right place to give you like a well-rounded?
Ultimately, I knew I wanted to go back to school for theology kind of on a whim last spring. I had spent the last year or so walking through the process of my husband converting to the Catholic Church from the Southern Baptist Convention, which he decided to do all on his own, but I was raised in the Catholic Church.
Yeah, right.
And
you're rubbing your belly. You're like, you want this? You want this? Baptism now.
Actually, we had some fantastic conversations about this leading up to our wedding, because I never pressured him on any of it. I said, ultimately, I hope we come to the same spot eventually by the time we want to raise our children and figure that out, but that's something we're going to have to navigate. And this was a really beautiful journey our family went on. But he asked me to be his sponsor, which is a very common situation in the Catholic Church when you're confirmed in the church, which essentially is like the sealing of your baptism. And we can get into all of that if you have any questions.
Do you guys need sponsors?
You have a sponsor. And this actually goes back to ancient
Celsius.
Roman times, which is so cool. Basically, you would be killed if you were trying to join the church back when Christianity was illegal in the Roman Empire. So there were a lot of people that they were concerned were spies going into the underground church and trying to expose who all of the Christians were so that they could be martyred by the Romans. So you had to have someone inside the church like vouch for you and sponsor you and essentially put their life on the line to say, no, this person is legit. The fish has a lot of different origins, but basically say this person is legit. They're actually wanting to become a Christian. I vouch for them and I would put my life on the line for them. And I'm going to mentor them through the process of joining the church. So as Catholics, we still do that 2,000 years later, which I think is really, really cool. And all of a sudden, I looked at the church and theology through a whole new lens with my husband asking all of these questions that I had learned about really since I was born, and I certainly had been exposed to in my Catholic high school, but had never approached through fresh eyes and through a totally fresh perspective. And out of the woodwork, out of nowhere, like dozens of people, other creators, people in the political world, a lot of personal friends, started asking me a whole lot of questions about Catholicism that I could provide kind of a rudimentary answer to, but I really wanted a more in-depth academic study of it. So started doing a whole lot of research on what program would be best for that, and enrolled in May. I started in May at Notre Dame, which was my dream school for college, and I didn't get in. I was waitlisted, and then I tried to get in for law school, and I thought that direction was where my life was going to go. Didn't get in. I got waitlisted for Notre Dame. So I'm having my Rudy moment. I'm really excited about the football season right now. That's very exciting.
Congratulations.
Thank you. And it's been such a beautiful journey. The program's actually geared towards creating lay leadership, so people who don't work for the church but work in other spaces of Catholicism, and helping to bring the church to the world in a more studied and pointed way. And it's been really, really cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm glad you got back into that college that you wanted to get into.
Thank you. It's been a good journey.
I could see you leaving class, like, thank you, professor. That was so great. And then you just come out with a sign. We want freedom. These professors hate you. Not you, professor. I love you.
No, my professors are great, to be fair. But ultimately, to bring this full circle for the college campus side of things, look, the American university system is incredibly corrupt. And I think the last year or so, sorry, professors, but it's true. The last year or so has been incredibly eye-opened about all of this for Americans, especially with all of the Ivy League universities giving in to a lot of these pro-terrorism demands and all of the insane things. It's exposed so much about what the true priority of most of these elite schools are, and that is indoctrination. It's not real education. It's to make you spend $250,000 on a degree that doesn't exist in the real world. And so then those people have no choice but to go back to school and to more hyper-specialize. And ultimately, that's how we get professors or teachers for the other levels of American education, which I said very often when I was in college. I warned in the political world, these ideas are not going to stay on college campuses. Very, very quickly, you're going to see them graduate with us and go to corporate boardrooms and the halls of Congress and all the way down to preschool classrooms, which we now know the #1 children's book in America the last few years is like Anti-Racist Baby or The Gay BCs. The Gay BCs. Real book. Fascinating read if you ever want to spend an afternoon wanting to blow your brains out. But the reason for that is because of all of these ideas that originated on college campuses. people are taking that back for a variety of reasons and in a variety of ways. The Jordan Peterson method, saying education doesn't have to be confined to a 4-year academic degree. Homeschooling is at the highest level it's ever been in the United States today, and people are realizing the school understanding that we have today in public school in America has really only existed for about 100 years. Before that, we had one-room schoolhouses, which is basically homeschooling co-ops. It's 10 or 12 families joining together with a single teacher and making it more personalized for every student. So I love seeing that coming back. And independent study. I think people are realizing, hey, I have this magical thing called the internet, and I have the answers to everything that has ever existed. I can go look this up on my own. I don't need to pay a woke advocate to teach it to me.
It was kind of like when the calculator came out.
Yeah.
I remember in school, they used to do these like long divisions, and I asked the teacher, I go, why do we need to still do that? And she was like, because what happens if calculators go away? And I go,
that was the answer?
No.
That's just a bad answer.
No, I said, can't you build another one? You built one. Can't you build another one? She goes, no, say all of the calculators went away. And so I was like, whoa. I was like, well, then I think we should stop doing math. But now we have ChatGPT. That is crazy. You don't the level of laziness that we've got.
Yeah.
Like you don't even have to, before you have to cite where you got your information from. Now you could just add ChatGPT to do everything for you. Are you worried about AI in the future?
Yeah, certainly. I think it, like any other technology, can provide really extreme benefits for society. AI is being used to diagnose cancers well in advance based on early symptoms than we've ever seen in the medical field right now. You're seeing attorneys use AI for really strong court cases. I think there's a lot of positive, beneficial aspects we can attribute to AI in the future. But when it comes to removing critical thinking, it's wildly concerning to me. Navigating academia with ChatGPT and all of the AI is really new to me this semester. We always get these emails like, just a reminder, you're not allowed to use ChatGPT, which I would never think to use for a paper anyway when you're debating theology. No, because I want to learn. Like I'm here, and grad school's a little different. Like you want to learn. You're paying to actually learn. It's not just something you feel you have to do. But AI for me becomes really scary when we remove the humanity interpersonal connection aspect. There was a video that went viral like 2 days ago about humanoid AI robot girlfriends. I don't know if you guys saw this on Instagram and TikTok, but there are companies making robots that look like humans that are programmed by AI and they can talk to you. And it's very freakishly real, and they're selling them mostly to young men as AI girlfriends. And this has already been a thing in the market without the body.
Like robots, or like just on the screen?
Without the robots, it's already been a thing. This has been a very lucrative business for the last several years. I talk a lot about dating and marriage on my show.
That's going to be a problem, especially for men that don't know how to speak to girls.
Yeah.
It's further isolating them, right? It's further removing them from our shared humanity, which we need to survive.
Also, it's like the compromising goes away. Like we're like super lucky, but we're very united on a lot of things. But normally people would have to like, all right, well, she likes to do this, and I'll do it because I love her. That will go out the window because you're like, my AI doesn't like to do that. Yeah. She likes to do exactly what I like to do.
Well, you could just reprogram her, right? Which
you can reprogram her too, just like a little quick button.
You guys just got married, and I'm sure that's been a huge thing to navigate and a big journey to learn
honestly,
how to
just
serve each other. And but it's not always easy, right? I mean, even understanding the dynamics between men and women. The number of times I've been married since June, I absolutely love marriage. It's been wonderful, but it's hard to try to learn how to live as one flesh with this other person who's so dramatically different from you, because men and women are so different.
What would you say is your key?
The key? Prayer, for sure. Every single night we pray together before bed without fail. Even if we're in the middle of a fight, we're like, you know what? Let's just get rid of it. Let's just
pray.
By
the way, is the funniest thing.
Oh yeah, you're like,
you made a real right now. All right? Okay.
Dear Father God.
Dear Father, I'm so sorry that I called her that. But she was acting like that. That's regardless. But
it always without fail softens the tension,
That's
which
so
is
funny.
good.
But it's true that certainly being married, I think you can like feel the shift of you don't longer feel like the burden is in your hands and it's our job to maintain a relationship, but you know that like God is here to hold a relationship, and the amount of times that you're able to just go to him and be like, okay, like help me through this, like give me the wisdom, help me, like guide me through this issue, and then he helps you resolve it together, and it's really like fascinating. It's beautiful, like having like
you
that
do
in
feel
marriage.
like a third person's a part of it.
Yeah, if you do it the right way, I would say. But yeah,
I think the key is. Not that I'm trying to mansplain it to you girls.
How dare you? Unbelievably rude.
I think honestly, like I do think a man needs to lead. I think naturally, I think if a man doesn't lead, then it throws off the balance of the home. That's just my opinion. Not everybody's opinion is that. But I think the man needs to lead the woman to God. And I think when the woman sees that you're serving a Lord and the wife as a church, and it's kind of like a mirror. The way I serve my wife is the way I serve my God, because the way my God serves me as his bride is the way I want to mirror it to my wife. So I think the key to like a really, really healthy, obviously prayer, but the step that I would take would be serving. I think when you serve your spouse, regardless of how you're behaving or how you're moving, if your mind is set on serving, it's very hard to dislike that. It's even if you come with problems. And I also think that another thing is be careful how you speak to each other. I think that's a very, very big thing that a lot of people kind of skip by. Words do matter.
Yeah.
Not all words are like, what I'm saying, they overtake that, but words do mean something. For example, if my wife, which she's not, but if my wife was lazy, I see a lot of women say, oh, my husband's lazy. And if he's lazy, that's fine, but you shouldn't be labeling him that, because now you're just putting that position on him. If my wife was lazy, I would encourage her with behaviors that I want her to be like. So I would be like, every time she would do something that wasn't lazy, I would encourage that behavior. Like, oh, I love the way you did that. My wife cooks for me 3 times a day. But there's not one time that she puts a plate in front of me and I don't thank her for it. Because people get comfortable. And I think comfortability is the death of a lot of things. A relationship, work ethic, and spiritual values. I think laziness is what the devil could use to get you to stop working.
Oh my gosh, if that isn't so true of everything in our society today too. Ultimately, we live in an instant gratification society. I mean, you can have something delivered to your door in an hour now from Amazon. You don't really see much of these heavy lifting jobs pushed in society anymore. Everything has to be incredibly...
My wife builds everything in this house. It's so embarrassing. It's so embarrassing. Don't get me wrong, she'll never take out the trash. If there's a fire, we're not debating who's going into the fire. I will protect this home. But if we have to put together something from IKEA, she loves it.
I'm just good at it. I just really enjoy it.
I'm dyslexic. I read this thing and I'm like, what are they doing? Why can't I just pay somebody to do this? And she's like, no, and she'll put on her belt with her hammer and her. And and honestly, it's kind of hot. I like it.
It's just something I enjoy. I like understanding how things work, and it's just fun,
like adult high stakes Legos. I love it.
Yeah,
it's
very
honestly, that's why she loved me. She looked at me. She's like, I can fix this. This is something I can put together.
But hey, what I want to mention is actually that thing that you're talking about with Robert the other day, and I thought it was his mentor that he talks to for the gospel. And he said something that was really interesting. He pointed out how the husband, so God obviously is first, and he watches over us. And then the husband's role is to watch over his wife. So then when the wife feels protected by her husband, then when she has a child, she's then the one who's watching over the child. And so it's this line in command. That way, when you look over your shoulder, you always have somebody looking at you and protecting you. Therefore, you're able to do your job in front of you and protect the person in front of you to the fullest.
I love that. Wow.
Yeah, every Monday I have a 3-hour intense Bible study where it's not only am I breaking down the gospel in every way possible, but I'm relaying it to how I should be doing it and how I should be participating. I think the reason I became successful this past few years is because I've been just trying to serve God. And I think God said, okay, I'll bless your fruits. I've been praying to walk in the Spirit and have fruits of the Spirit. And a lot of people are like, oh, he's just pushing the gospel, but it's kind of hard when you fall in love with God and you see what he's doing and you see his plans and you see what's in motion. It's kind of hard to go back from being the salt of the world into this bland world that they want you to be a part of. And so the theory that I have is everybody's a preacher and everybody serves a God.
Yeah.
I just rather preach and serve the right one.
I see such a hunger for that right now with young men especially, which is really inspiring because for the last few years, especially in the political world, all you ever hear about young men is all these soy boy liberals who wear dresses to the awards ceremonies and we have no men. Where are all the men?
I'm glad you're not debating people anymore or dealing with people with trauma, dude.
But people, I think we're so used to that became the norm. And all of a sudden, young men have just come raging back with a fire for real masculinity, for truth, for God. Right now, Bible sales in America are up 22% this last year alone. The church is seeing more new members of Christianity than any other year in modern history. You're watching these mass baptism events on college campuses. The Ohio State football players have a podcast about their faith, and they talk about the gospel in between weekend games. I'm sorry,
Now
I'm
I
not
can get into
rooting for you.
sports.
I'm not rooting for you, Ohio State. I'm all Notre Dame for the national
Weren't you
championship.
from Ohio, though? Or no, Indy?
Colorado
sorry.
originally. And it's just shocking because I think nobody saw that coming. Everybody labeled Gen Z in particular as a godless generation, a truly atheist generation. But not only are we running back to Christ, we're running back to traditional Christianity, the way that we've been doing this for thousands upon thousands of years. In the Catholic Church, for example, young Gen Z, young adult Americans are the most likely generation to go to the traditional Latin Mass, like the most traditional with a capital T way you could possibly do church on Sunday morning. And nobody expected that to happen, but it's being led by these young men who are so hungry for a revival in our society. And I think you and Jordan Peterson and Charlie Kirk have a lot of thanks from our society for that, because it is impossible to go back to an empty secular society based on what? The adoration from this world? Like, no thanks. This world kind of sucks, actually. I'd rather keep my eyes focused on heaven. And we're hungry for so much more. And I think that's really shining through in your content and all the conversations you're having.
Oh, thank you. Well, it's all him. It's not me. I literally was broken, and he like rebuilt me. And in the process, he gave me a platform that it's it's so funny. Like, I always wanted glory. I always did. But now when I receive glory, I know it's not from me. So it's so uncomfortable to take it. It's like when people compliment you, it's kind of like if you look at a bookshelf that's in this house. I didn't build it, my wife did. So if somebody comes up to me, what a wonderful bookshelf. Did you put this up? I can't be like, yeah, I did it with my bare hands.
It's all me.
So my wife, like, you got to give the credit where it's due. And it's all God. And I think my people were Assyrians. And back in the day when Jonah had to save them, the one thing they had to do is just repent. And I think a lot of people think that they have to do a lot more than repent. I think a sorry goes a long way.
Yeah.
Even in a relationship, like me and Belle were just talking about this, like your actions could do whatever, but if you're sorry, your actions will show that. And if you really are sorry, you'll stop doing the things that hurt you, hurt this country, hurt your relationship, hurt your parents, hurt your loved ones. Like if you really were sorry, you would try to be a better human. And I think this past 10 years, we've been watching people trying to better themselves only for a monetary or a monetizing aspect.
Yeah.
But now we've gotten to such a broken, shambled spot that people are like, dude, like we need God. And these people are not embarrassed to go out and proclaim the Lord. And I think that, like we got to look at the timing. Look, Trump's going back into office. His country's starting to make sense again. People are starting to unite. All of a sudden, at the same time that we're exalting the name of God, like, come on, there has to be something there where people could open up their eyes and be like, yo, look at this time of years. They pushed God out. Look what they suffered. Now look at these people. Look at their praising God. The young kids are motivating the adults. You should be embarrassed. It should be the other way around. But I think it goes back to the saying where like hard times make strong men. And what is, I don't know the rest of it, to be honest.
Weak men create the hard times, and then it just continues to circulate.
And I think right now, do you believe we're about to go into the golden age of America?
I do. I love that term that Trump coined a couple of weeks ago. I think it was at Turning Point's conference. He said that for the first time. I do. And not just politically, but I think really across the board, even larger than the United States, we're watching a reckoning between lies that have become truth and people hungry for actual truth, which I said earlier has a name. That name is Christ, who is the truth. And you're seeing this in Canada. We saw that with the resignation of their insane situation up there. Praying for you, Canada, sending freedom vibes. You're seeing this in the UK with people getting thrown in prison for 20 months for sharing something on Facebook that's critical of the government. Thing?
It's
a real thing happening to dozens of people.
Or are they still in there?
No. They're letting out rapists and pedophiles from prison to make more room in prison for people's social media posts. Not even an exaggeration. This is quite real. And all of my British friends I talk to are terrified, really, for what the next few years looks like.
Imagine being in a cell and be like, what'd you do? I stabbed a 6-year-old.
I retweeted
What'd you do? I tweeted Andrew Tate's speech. I don't know why I'm even here.
Actually, that's not even a joke, which is really sad.
Did you see he wants to run for something?
Yeah, he wants to run for PM of the
This
UK.
dude's always running, bro.
So there you
Either
go.
running from jail or running for a political office.
I don't know, but you're seeing this everywhere in
Yeah.
the West, and you're watching these. I'm going to say conservative, but I don't necessarily mean like Republican. So try to divorce capital C conservative with lowercase. These traditional conservative values start to rise to the top again in Europe, in the UK, in Canada, in Australia, in New Zealand, in the United States. And I think people are realizing this need for repentance. We realize we've gone too far, and we're saying, okay, we can either continue plummeting into chaos and leading our world into insanity and brokenness and sin, or we can say, even though we let things go way too far, now we can say enough and just try to walk back in the other direction.
Yeah. I think even if you don't believe in God, like people like Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
Like Joe Rogan doesn't fully believe in God.
I think he's getting there.
Yo, I've been praying for it. I really have. I always pray for him because I think like I love people with his heart. He's never disrespectful about it. He's just curious and he asks questions. I think that's a heart God could work with. I think if he was being blasphemous, I think that could be like a hardening of the heart. But watching him have somebody like Wes on and like all these people and having good conversations, like even if he doesn't believe in God, just him having these conversations sparks things in people's hearts. So I always pray for him and pray for his protection because like honestly, Joe Rogan was a huge inspiration for me to even leave Impulsive. I saw a clip of him getting on stage and yelling at a comedian for stealing jokes. And dude, you can't do that. Like it would have tarnished his career, but he rather stand on who he was and his truth. And God blessed him for being a good man and standing up for the truth of things. And so like, I would love to see him at least inherit God's peace. Do you get what I'm saying? Because you could have billions of dollars, but if you don't have God's peace, it could be daunting.
You can't take it
sometimes.
with you, ultimately.
What do you think will do it for him? Do you think that, I think sometimes, I don't know, sometimes when things go so smoothly, for a while, and I don't know his life whatsoever, but he captures information right from all sorts of people. So he gains a lot of wisdom. And so maybe he's just not realizing that source of wisdom is God quite yet. You know what I mean? I wonder if something pivotal will have to happen in his life.
That's a good question.
I think it would be people praying for him.
Yeah.
I pray, like, it's so funny to say this. A lot of my friends got baptized, and it wasn't really for me preaching to them. It was two things that I found very important. Behaving like Christ, so they don't see the hypocrisy out of you. Because they can't believe something that you don't believe in if you're not going to act like it. And then second is, don't speak to them about it, speak to God about it. Like, really talk. Like, if he is your father and that is your friend, how much do you hate that man for you not to talk to him about God?
Yeah, absolutely.
But I don't want to push him away, so I behave in a way that represents God. And then when I'm in my closet alone, I beg God to reveal himself to him. Even though he's not asking for it, I go in behalf of him. And I said, please, like, go to him. Like, I know he's not asking you, but like, I'm asking you as your son, you need to go to him. And I've seen that this turns hearts. Like, my best friend got baptized the same day that I got baptized. And watching him go into the water changed my life because I was like, dude, this guy's getting baptized. I never thought it would ever be possible, but it was only a few months or like a few years of me just consistently petitioning that to God and saying, God, you need to go after this guy's heart. You need to go after his heart. So if Joe Rogan would ever turn over to Christ, is because people love him and they're praying that he just sees him. And honestly, I always see people getting on the podcast and showing him facts. I just wish somebody would pray with him there.
Yeah. Speak to his heart more.
Just submit. Like, and I think he would do it. I mean, Bobby Lee was on this podcast and he even prayed. A lot of people thought it was a joke, but I saw it and I feel like he really prayed and God willing, that turns his heart. But I think that we forget that God is forever the same yesterday, today, and tomorrow. And we need to actively pray and petition these hearts in front of God.
Well, we forget too, God is a God of miracles. He always has been. And, nowadays, what do you think of as a miracle? Something that you read about in the Old Testament or the times of Christ. You don't associate that with modern society, maybe because everything is so advanced technologically and we can make our own miracles essentially. But prayer should never be our last line of defense. It should always be our first line of offense. It's what we should be running to, bringing everything we ask before God. Scripture reminds us of that over and over again. And if God can transform the hearts of the most imperfect, horrible people throughout history to rise them up to bring his plan to fruition in the world, who are we to say that anyone is exempt from that? Anybody's heart can be transformed and their soul hunger for God and then become his largest and loudest advocate. I think that's been really cool about this last year or so with this revival we're seeing in American culture. A lot of people are incredibly skeptical of it, and I understand the skepticism, but you're watching people who were former OnlyFans creators or porn stars now totally transform.
The redhead girl?
Nala, I had her on my podcast the week after she said all of that.
She went to my gym.
Time. She's amazing.
I'm not exaggerating. This is a true story. And Belle's an eyewitness to this. I showed Belle her, and my friend goes, she came from a Christian home. And I said, really?
Yep.
And I said, then let's pray that she returns home. Literally, not even a month later, she gets baptized.
Anything is possible, right?
100%.
So just after she came out publicly with her baptism story, we had her on my podcast. And this was before she did Michael Knowles. It was like right before she talked to anybody about this publicly. And it was such a beautiful story of conversion and God transforming your heart to go from what we would associate with like the craziest, most sinful, lowly lifestyle to all of a sudden leaving everything behind to chase after him. And it's been really disheartening for me, I think, to see how many people are saying her story isn't valid because what she did was too bad, or there's just no coming back from a lifestyle like that.
They say no press is bad press.
Yeah.
That's good because so many people watch them break her down and so many people follow.
Absolutely.
It might look bad from the outside perspective. Like the impulsive thing for me, everybody was mocking me, but that pushed me into a good thing.
Absolutely.
A lot of mockery God could use for a good thing. And you know what I noticed about her character, and anybody who's actually in a secular realm, they look like they need a new identity. And when I spoke to her in real life, it looked like she had this mask on, and she was speaking to me about I felt like I wasn't speaking to her. I felt like I was speaking to a character that she was presenting to me.
Interesting.
And then when I'm watching on podcast, bro, the way she's so wise and can articulate, I go, I know that wisdom. I've been bathed in that wisdom. You could see when somebody's actually walking with Christ because you could literally see a shift in the renewal of the mind. You could see the behavior. And when that guy came after her and was attacking
horrible.
her,
I was just going to bring that up.
her class and the way she responded, that was like, wow. Out of all the moments, I could tell that God was looking down, very proud of her.
Yeah.
Even though of her behavior in the past. People forget that the first person that watched Jesus come out was an old prostitute. So God doesn't just choose men that are awesome or women that are awesome. He always chose the most broken individuals so he could show his glory through them. And I'm really praying that she just keeps going and she doesn't get demotivated because the devil now has a target on her.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Her and so many people like her. I have a dear, dear friend named Josh Broome, who you might be familiar with. He actually was like the #1 actor in the porn space in Los Angeles for years and years.
No, why would you say that? Why would you say that? You were like, George, you would know this.
him, George.
Is he bald?
No.
Does he fix things in the videos?
No, just wait.
Does he help women that are stuck in locations that can't get out?
Okay, now you're just digging yourself in.
I
can't even know what you're doing. No, but Josh is amazing. We've been friends for several years, and he literally at an award ceremony won like their version of the Oscars. I don't remember what this is called. Best Male Actor of the Year in the porn industry. And the very next day, left LA, like drove away, said, I can't live like this anymore. I don't even go by my real name. I'm like this character that I'm playing of myself. I don't know who I am anymore. I don't talk to my family anymore. My life is empty, even though I have all of these things and all this acclaim and all this wealth and everything. He's now bringing people to Christ every single day as a pastor. He has a beautiful young family. He's an amazing individual. And you see that transformation in the videos that he posts of his old life versus his new life. It's a visible change that I think is so inspiring and is really causing people to take stock in, wow, I might be a really crappy person. I might have made a lot of horrible decisions in my past. I might be the farthest thing from what someone might call a Christian or a believer or somebody worth emulating, but anybody is capable of becoming a saint ultimately if we're just willing to abandon our old identity and walk with Christ.
It's that Jesus glow.
Amen. Amen.
You know?
All right, let's jump back into some politics because I kind of want to learn from you. What are you excited to see the dream team put together? We got Vivek, we got the Kennedy, we got Trump, we got by the way, the fact that we're even having conversations with people and learning from them is wild. But what they brought to the table at this podcast was like exciting, and me and Belle would always walk away and be like, yeah, I hope. Like I felt like they were like kind of like dreaming big.
Yeah.
But now watching all of these people like kind of be the forefront of America and like really bring back the roots of this country, what's the thing you're most excited about them doing?
Oh my gosh, great question, because honestly, I am nothing if not an eternal optimist, and I was so excited about this campaign, but there was a voice in the back of my head for the last several months. There's just no way. There's no way they're going to let these people come back into power. That's just going to be impossible. So I was really excited about everything they've been talking about for the last year or so, but I just couldn't really believe it was real until we're here now. And what I'm really stunned by, more than anything these last few months, has been this dream team idea, the unity party, so to speak, that we're realizing the need to think bigger than republicanism. I have been a bit of a critic every once in a while about the Republican Party failing to reach younger voters in particular, and failing to understand that most of the issues we're dealing with as Americans are not political per se. They are cultural issues like the education of our children, the decline in marriage, the food that we're eating that is slowly poisoning us, the decline of religion in society. These are very severe problems that ultimately impact the political problems we talk about later on. But for whatever reason, for the last several election cycles, the Republican Party has been so insistent on focusing on what Republicans always talk about, and that's money. Tax cuts, we need to make sure groceries are more affordable, we need to make sure people can get a job and afford a house, which is very important, but that is maybe 0.5% of all of the issues that we're dealing with as a society. And I think this conservative movement that's so much bigger than the Republican Party has forced people to have bigger conversations about our national identity and all of those other subjects I just talked about. So what I love that the Trump campaign has done this time around is pull in good ideas from as many places as they possibly can. About a year ago, last January, I was in Iowa on that crazy blizzard snowstorm day with the Vivek campaign right before the Iowa caucus. And it was fascinating hearing some of his ideas for how to revive being proud to be an American again from this cultural perspective. I'm incredibly impressed with J.D. Vance, and I think his office is going to do a phenomenal job. And I love this dream team scenario teaming up with the Kennedys. I never expected that would happen. I'm a conservative, and I don't agree with every single thing that RFK Jr. stands for, but this Make America Healthy Again movement, I am incredibly passionate about.
Dude, he's
so
ripped.
important. He's amazing.
He's
First
ripped.
of all, he's like a superhero.
He's ripped.
But what he's talking about is real and has been real, and people have been talking about this for 15, 20 years
They
in the health
mocked him
space.
for what his thoughts were.
Well, now they say it's right-wing propaganda, which it never was 15, 20 years ago when
Yeah.
people were concerned about food dyes and mass obesity with children. Well over 50% of American teenagers and children today are obese. Less than 3% of Japanese teenagers and children, we just talked about Japan, are obese. So clearly something is dramatically wrong
It's
with our
food.
healthcare system and our food.
When I went to other countries, and I ate like an animal. I didn't
yeah.
eat normally because I'm traveling. If I'm in Italy, I'm not going to sit there and not have a pizza,
No,
and
you're
not have
gonna have
pasta.
pasta all
every
day.
I went to Greece, I had 4 gyros, like gyros every day, all the time. I lost weight.
Mm-hmm.
I was starting to see abs again. I was like, this doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make sense.
It doesn't make
and
sense.
And yet now it's right-wing supremacy propaganda, according to our media. Literally the day after RFK started talking about seed oils really publicly, when he resigned his campaign before he teamed up with Trump, and he gave his very, very beautiful, eloquent resignation speech, he talked about the few things he was really hoping to accomplish no matter who ends up becoming the president, and he hopes to work with them. Seed oils being one of those things.
Terrible for you.
They're terrible for you. I'm so glad people are talking more about this,
Terrible.
but if you're not
Paul's
familiar...
a huge advocate about that.
Basically just lighter fluid basically that we're using
it really
as a
is.
substitute for olive oil in all of our food, and your body can't break it down, so it causes mass inflammation and autoimmune issues and cancer and all kinds of stuff, and it's in everything. Like, I highly encourage, read any label in your pantry, and I guarantee you seed oils are a part of this. The next day, all of these news organizations are running headlines why seed oils are actually good for you, and they're calling out RFK
of course, because
as
they're
this
cheaper to
horrible
use.
propagandist, And now, of course, that Trump's been reelected and you're seeing this change in society, everyone's starting to reckon with the truth again. So the FDA this last week, groundbreaking information. I hate the FDA. I hated them when I was in grad school and we were learning about how the process works for all of these certifications, and I hate them even more now. They finally admitted this week, for the very first time ever, eggs are actually healthy for you. Oops, sorry, we've been lying to you for decades and decades that eggs raise your cholesterol and they're terrible for you and you can't eat too many of them. Nope, totally reversed course this last week or so because people are waking up and we're realizing the experts have really had an agenda for so long.
They had profits.
So many things are flip-flopped, it's just understanding like the healthy fats versus the unhealthy fats,
Yep.
the healthy sugars versus the unhealthy sugars. I mean, if you just look at our country versus different countries, European countries, I was born and raised in France, the things that are banned over there versus the things that are allowed here.
It's crazy.
You just look at the difference.
People are eating Snickers because you're like, well, I'm not going to eat a banana. It has the same sugar. I go, my man.
It's not the same thing.
My brother in Christ.
My man. You need to go to college.
No, but maybe not, because college has been teaching all of this stuff, which is so
Dude, I don't know how you got
pyramid.
accepted into college with that mouth, bro. Like, I really don't. You're about to be on the waiting list again.
It's okay.
Cereals on the food
Cereal
pyramid.
is terrible. We were in Canada a few weeks ago, my family, for a family vacation over Christmas. And I had just seen a video a few days before that comparing American Fruit Loops to Canadian Fruit Loops. I don't know if you've ever seen the difference.
They look different.
Yeah.
Oh, they look immediately different. One looks like it's actually edible and one looks like neon colors of plastic because, newsflash, it probably is neon colors of plastic. And I learned the other day, Americans every single week on average are ingesting enough microplastics every week to be the size of a credit card.
Yes.
Every week.
It's insane.
It's horrifying. So beyond just Maha and all of that, what I'm really encouraged by, make America healthy again. Maha, baby.
Maha. I thought you had a
The
stroke.
political jargon. I'm really just encouraged. This administration seems so excited about these cultural issues again and getting rid of the Department of Education and bringing health back to the most basic level of nutrition and having ownership over that, in changing our society's adherence to God and his principles and making faith more mainstream again. I'm very, very excited. And I hope this gets much bigger than secure the border and taxes, which are very important. And I hope we continue fighting for that. But what we're missing in America today, as Vivek Ramaswamy said many times during the primary debates, is our sense of national identity. We don't know who we are. We don't know what our values are. We don't know what we believe in. And I think we're watching this seismic shift of a reckoning happen to redefine that for the future.
You know what I loved is that Vivek and Robert were both running for the presidency. But they didn't get bitter. And when they fell out, they joined with Trump because they rather the movement keep moving than them just be like, oh, well, if I'm not going to win, then I don't give a shit. You know what I mean? Like, that is like a crazy mindset. My favorite video that I watched recently was Obama and Trump sitting and talking to each other.
Yeah.
The reason I enjoyed that is because if I had to send a prayer to God, the only prayer that I'd ask, actually not the only prayer, I have a lot, but one of the prayers I'd ask for this country is, I'm tired of watching us be so divided to a point where we're blindsided to not everything on the left is wrong. Not everything on the right is right. Like, they gotta meet in the middle. Like, I can't teach my kids to be loving to their neighbors if they're gonna throw away every good idea that they have because they hold a few bad ideas. We gotta get to a place where if Trump and Obama could sit down and be like, yo, I don't agree with this, but I do like this. We should sit together and talk about this. We should bring America united again. Like, it needs to be united. There shouldn't be a left side and a right side. That's dumb. It should never be like that. I don't want to push. That's why when people are like, oh, you're Republican. I'm like, no. I side for what's good and true for this country. If you bring ideas that are good, then I'll sit with you and we'll discuss them and we'll build them. I'm not going to shoot down every idea you have because a few of your ideas is something I don't go along with.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Which is exactly what we're seeing with RFK teaming up with Trump.
Yeah.
There's been a lot of people frustrated by that, especially
Super frustrated.
entrenched political people that have been in D.C. longer than twice the time we've been alive. We don't need to name names, but I think we all know who we're talking about. And yet there's this refreshing...
We might have to. Who are we talking about?
Oh, quite literally, my biggest beef in the entire world is with the United States Congress. I've been asked so many times, would you ever run for Congress? Because a lot of my younger friends are. Caroline Leavitt, who's the new youngest ever White House press secretary, was a White House intern with me. She's 27. She's my age.
That's crazy.
We interned in the same class, and she ended up going on to run for Congress as the youngest person ever to run. She ended up not winning, which was very entrenched politics. We don't need to get into all of that, but she's amazing. And there's a handful of other Gen Zers starting to throw their name into the ring, and so many people have asked me, would you run for Congress? Would you run for Congress?
Would you run for Congress?
No. And I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. I think God is calling me to have a much different sphere of influence right now than directly writing policy, but using my voice to start these conversations and bring people together from that commentary perspective. But there's also a TV show that was big in the 90s and early 2000s called The West Wing. I don't know if you've ever seen it. Great TV. Fantastic. Back when everybody could get into a TV show like this. In the very first episode, the guy who plays the deputy chief of staff says in one of his first lines, God, I'm so sick of Congress, I could vomit. And I say that all the time now because it's always my feelings related to Congress. Really, 99% of the time, you're not talking about the left and the right fighting each other and having great debate and writing great legislation anymore. You're talking about a uniparty who is insider trading and making a whole lot of money off of what they know from policy and trying to keep themselves in positions of power. And the way Congress elections work every 2 years in the House, anyway, and every 6 years in the Senate, there's really no incentive to fix the problems at all. Because by the minute you fix the problem, then 6 months later, you're going to have to figure out something else to run on again. So you've seen people like Nancy Pelosi, for example, be in Washington, D.C. for decades and decades and decades and decades running on the same stuff every year and a half in their reelection campaign. This woman was born before the invention of the microwave oven. Like, I just want you to think about that.
She looks good.
I mean, I guess. Lots of Botox.
Nancy, you're looking good,
plastic
Nancy.
surgery. She was born,
I should have known from the way, Nancy.
She was born before Pearl Harbor. Like, just think about that for a minute. And then you multiply that by all of the other members of Congress. There was a member of the House
Your roasts
who
are
went
ridiculous, by the
missing
way.
for the last, 6 months. We had no idea where this woman was. We found her a couple days ago in a nursing home for dementia care.
Oh, wow.
Sitting member of Congress. This is very real. What happens on the Hill in Washington, D.C. So I really like that you're seeing those people get frustrated by Trump. They did in 2016, but they're more frustrated now because of this outsider politician unity party concept that the government should work for the people. That's kind of how we were established as a country. And I think there's a lot of people about to lose their jobs, which is a good thing because at least it'll bring this new generation of leadership back into policy again.
I hope it rolls out for a bit. A lot of people get worried that the 4 years won't be enough, but I think the country's seen enough where they're like, if Trump, God willing, puts everything back in the right direction, that people are going to be like, oh, let's stick with this for a bit.
I do too.
What do you think about lobbyists?
I understand why they have their place, having worked in the Beltway, because you do need advocacy for the right causes, and that's what lobbying was originally meant to be, is go present your case in front of members of Congress and the president and try to get something changed in terms of policy. Nowadays, just like any other special interest group, lobbying is completely out of control. Really, if you want...
I can't wait till good TV comes back because I feel like they're going to bring up a show called The Lobbyists.
Oh, I'm sure they will.
Because that, when I heard about this mafia organization, that is crazy, bro.
Oh, it's
You
insane.
should write it.
You
It's a
should.
good
You could write the TV show.
Thanks, guys. Would you play Congress in the show?
We'll do something fun. It'll be good.
Wait, so you're going back to Washington. So tell us about that journey.
I am really excited to be back. We're moving in a couple of weeks.
Is that 'cause you
back to
hated
the
Miami?
Beltway. I never loved Miami for a lot of reasons. It's just not my place personally.
That was one of my questions because when I'm sitting there,
You're like,
I've been to
Miami.
and I'm like, she moved to Miami. I'm like, I wonder if she likes it. And then as soon as you walked in, like, yeah, we're moving out. And I'm like, makes a lot of sense.
My husband, we relocated down there when we were engaged for his job. And it's been great. You know, I love certain aspects of Florida. People are incredibly warm and wonderful. All of the policies are going in the right direction. I think there's a beautiful cultural shift that's happening in Florida, impacting the rest of the country. I'm a mountain kid from Colorado, so Florida is way too crowded and way too much flat for me. It's not very fun to get outside. Granted, DC is not great in terms of exactly where I want to be, especially to raise our family. But I feel really called to be there and make a difference right now, especially in trying to expose a lot of these great things that these incredible leaders are working on. So we're really excited to bring my show up there and interview a lot of those people as often as we can. There's some rumors about content creators getting more access to the press briefing room and to the White House in general this next year. So I would love to be a big part of that.
Where are we at in life, dude?
I love it though, right?
No, I know, but like, how bad did they do when they have it so
Exactly. Who set the precedent that CNN or MSNBC has the only right to break the news of what the government is doing. They have no right to do that, particularly because it's just propaganda. It's not actually news.
But I really hope they choose the right one.
They will. I'm sure they will. I love the team that they're putting together for the comms team.
If I see a TikToker dancing there while they're talking, I'm going to lose my mind.
There's probably going to be TikTokers. I don't know that they're going to be dancing necessarily, but...
Don't vote for RAT. We're like, dude.
But I think it makes sense. It's a new generation of media and reporting, and at least it's true.
And the news can react to what somebody's breaking on X or TikTok. They don't have to be the only people to tell you that first. I think right now we're coming to this point where the influence of people, of independent media and content creators, has for the very first time overtaken these legacy media organizations that have
actually
millions
doing
of dollars because they are the actual journalists now. And for whatever reason, real journalism has yet to catch up with that. Not a single media organization is really adhering to this shift. There's a handful of newspapers, like the Washington Post has a TikTok account that does okay. Daily Mail has a TikTok account that does okay. But it's the news repurposed for social media. It's not social specific content.
Well, speaking of Congress, and speaking of TikTok.
Oh, very fun. This might be outdated by the time this episode comes out in a few days, but let's get into it.
When is that? Like, wait. Oh, yeah, you're right. It might be outdated.
We're waiting for an opinion, like literally any second it could drop. So I don't know.
I watched a little bit of how they were trying to defend it. It didn't look great.
Interesting. Why do you say that?
Because they were just like confessing to doing like very illegal things.
Like what?
About like spying on us.
Okay, so the way TikTok is set up and the reason everybody has this concern about national security.
Which, by the way, I want TikTok.
Yeah, I do too.
Okay, because you were looking at me like in a way
I'm
that
an
I
extreme
didn't like
TikTok apologist. A lot of people hate me for that in the conservative world
but
and think that I'm incredibly naive.
Defending it.
They can do a much better job defending it. And I feel like I'm on that crusade every single day on the news and in my content. Basically, why people are concerned is because of the governance structure of the ownership company, ByteDance, that's based in Shanghai. And that theoretically, if the CCP wanted your data, they could call any company based in China and China's territories to access that data. There is very little to no evidence ever that the CCP has actually done that.
But
for
dog, everyone's
data.
doing that.
But let me get there. But there is abundant evidence, overwhelming evidence on dozens of occasions that Meta has sold your data to the CCP, that Twitter has sold your data to the CCP and Russia, that our own government can call up any American social media company and say, hey, you know that story that makes us look really bad for what we just did? Wipe it off the internet immediately and let's just censor everyone. And while we're at it, give us their data. Airbnb has sold your data to the CCP numerous times and nobody talks about that. So from the get-go, I've said...
So why are they coming after TikTok?
Why are they coming after TikTok? It's not because of national security. I have said this from the get-go.
Is freedom of speech?
It is a freedom of speech issue, first and foremost. And this is what I wish more people understood about this and ultimately what this court case is all about. So I'm anxious to see how the Supreme Court rules on it. Way back when, in March of 2022, you just asked me about lobbyists, so this is going to be really fun. In March of 2022, Meta gets in huge trouble with public opinion because it comes out that they have sold your data to China. Really bad stuff. Oh no, American companies sold your data to China. So that month, they hire a very well-known conservative consulting firm, aka lobbying. Consulting is the nice way of saying lobbying in DC, called Targeted Victory, that typically works for Republican causes and conservative issues. I've known many people who've worked there. It's a very well plugged-in conservative thing in the Beltway in Washington. 2, change public opinion and change the tide of public opinion against TikTok. How were they going to do that? Plant op-eds and media stories all over the country in local newspapers and national media organizations, write legislation about why TikTok is dangerous for the United States and try to get people to say this from a policy perspective, and basically make the argument that TikTok is a cesspool of leftist indoctrination undermining American values. This was their whole strategy from the get-go in March of 2022. Now, you make a weird face at that. I did too, because I'm like, the exact same content that exists on TikTok exists everywhere else. Like Twitter, by the way, is the #1 porn problem app on the App Store. There is abundant pornography all over Twitter. And we don't talk about that problem. There is abundant extreme leftism and degeneracy on Instagram Reels and on YouTube Shorts, but we don't talk about that. So
does X make you sad?
Because of the pornography side of things? Or just in general? I mean, X makes me sad for a lot of reasons.
No, that's what I'm saying. Like, I remember Belle mentions too, she goes, hey, don't look at X because it changes the mood of my whole day.
It does.
And one day I went on X and I saw Elon say that we're going to recalibrate it, not because of the like free speech. He's still going to give free speech, but it's just so much hatred.
It's so depressing. It's where
so
dreams
sad.
go to die right now.
It's like Instagram is like what everybody wants to be like.
Yeah.
And then X is like, this is reality.
Life sucks. I hate everything. You're all
It's like the
stupid.
black market. Some of the videos that he was watching, like he got down this loop of darkness and watching
it's
people
horrible.
kill each other. Like, how are
Yeah.
we able to
How are
watch
we going to
this?
keep up with the
cesspool.
cartel if we don't get rid of it?
But TikTok's the problem, right? So I was always really skeptical of this, and then I started doing some more digging. And the law that actually we're debating right now, that's at the Supreme Court, the bill that was written for this law is the biggest walking red flag I have ever seen come out of Congress. And we should have expected that, because I don't know if you watched the Judiciary Committee hearings during all of this with...
We were busy.
Oh my gosh. Literally, members of Congress are sitting there who are like 85 years old asking the CEO of TikTok, does TikTok connect to the home Wi-Fi network? How you're spying on me because the app's connecting to my home Wi-Fi network. And the CEO of TikTok is like, yeah, that's literally how the internet works. Like, it doesn't have to connect to your Wi-Fi. You can like turn your Wi-Fi off on your phone, but that's just how social media works. I don't know how to explain this to you. It was excruciating. So they write this bill that gets overwhelming bipartisan support, both Republicans and Democrats supporting it, that basically singles out TikTok as this national security concern, doesn't say anything about American companies selling your data to foreign adversaries like the CCP. That's still allowed under law. And specifically gives the president of the United States and a member of his cabinet unfettered decision-making to decide what apps constitute a threat to national security. And it's not just apps, it's websites, it's gaming platforms, it's like online banking, pretty much everything on the internet that one guy determines is a threat to national security, they can instantly shut down beyond TikTok in the future.
It's very confusing what they
Very
think
scary.
is a threat or not. Like, I'm not opposed to like. I think it should be free. I like anything if you're creating it, obviously with some limits. But how did Grand Theft Auto? Like,
That's so true.
Bro, like I was 9 years old beating up a prostitute with a bat and watching the car shake like this. I didn't even know
That's
why
American
the car was shaking.
culture.
Do you know what I'm saying? Like how was Vice City okay, but then like TikTok is like no, this is not good for America. This we can't do that.
Ultimately, I've come to the conclusion that the big difference between TikTok and every American social media platform that can still sell your data, national security, is that TikTok is not owned by Americans, which is concerning to some people. But ultimately, if you think about what's happened in the last few weeks and everything that we've learned in the last few weeks, over the last 4 years, we've seen the government, the president of the United States and the vice president of the United States pick up the phone and call the most impactful tech CEOs in the world and say, hey, we made a mistake and people are not happy with us because of how we handled COVID, or because my son was involved in some really shady criminal activity. I think we all know that now. And we want you to wipe all of that off the face of the internet. Anyone who's even remotely suggesting that, take down their account, take down their posts. It makes us look bad, period, full stop. That's really concerning to me.
That's dangerous.
It's a police state. It's Big Brother. It's 1984, actually. And nobody is equating that to what the reality is of mass censorship and a society trying to get you to implement groupthink. They can't do that for TikTok because it's not an American company. TikTok would say, no. And so you're watching a lot of this criticism of the American government thrive on TikTok, which is why I believe Donald Trump won such a massive majority of the young male vote in our country, and why young women shifted to Donald Trump 11 points from the Democrat Party to the Republican Party in this last election cycle.
Because of TikTok?
It's because we're using TikTok. There are almost
So they're trying to get rid of it
million
now for the next election.
There are almost 200 million Americans on TikTok regularly, 70% of whom are Gen Z. And we're not just using it as a video, entertainment, get ready with me platform. It's actually, among Gen Zers, the #1 search engine in America, more than Google. So when we're looking up where to go to dinner on Friday night or where to go on vacation or what are the candidates talking about, we're going to TikTok, which is insane because it shows this seismic shift in how we're exchanging information. It's not the news.
It's a big power shift.
It's people.
No,
It's a
it's
big
true
power
because I
shift.
do that. I go and search for things like what's the best product for this because
Yep.
I know people are going to give me real reviews.
So I think they're
Real,
threatened.
that word that you said is powerful. Real.
Real, authentic, transparent.
That's kind of crazy. You know what America needs to hire? the same PR team that Mark Zuckerberg hired. Because this dude looks healthier.
He does.
He looks
He's having quite a glow up.
I literally looked at this kid before, and I would look at him in Congress like, Senate, I'm so sorry. No, in Senate. And I'm like, who's this alien? Why is this alien in Congress? And they're like, that's the guy who owns Facebook, and he's in trouble. And now it's this UFC fighter sitting with Joe Rogan, and I'm like, yo, this guy's lit. Who's this guy? Same dude. I was like, something happened, bro. He looks tanner. His hair looks nice.
He does.
His skin looks...
He looks healthier.
Yeah, bro.
He worked on himself.
Do you think that this poor guy, was it his problem? Or do you think it was literally do you think it was just, and no disrespect to Mark, do you think he was just behind his computer and the government's like, hey man, you gotta handle this? He's like, okay.
Yes, actually. I don't know.
What are you gonna do? What are you gonna do if Congress or the government calls you?
If Joe Biden calls you and says, we're gonna regulate your company out of existence if you don't do this? I mean, I don't know Mark Zuckerberg. I've never met Mark Zuckerberg. I don't really want to make a personal judgment on his character. I have no idea if he's having a genuine red pill glow up moment or if that's just convenient because of where the country is going right now. What I do know is this week he put out a 5-minute video saying, oops, we kind of messed up the last few years. Sorry, everyone, for censoring you into oblivion, and our fact checkers that it turns out we're admitting now weren't actually fact-checking. They were instituting political bias on our platform, which hit creators like me extremely hard over the last few years. And hey, I know we went a little extreme with the gender stuff, so now you can say on all Meta platforms, gender issues and transgenderism is a mental illness. You can say that now freely. They said that in their new policies.
Honestly, I'm not mad at an apology. And
I'm not either.
No. I think I don't even want to make jokes about it because I think we got to a place where people are so ruthless that they don't even want an apology. And if you do something wrong and you apologize for it, bygones
you
are
own
bygones.
up to it. Yeah, I'm
Water
incredibly
underneath the
happy
bridge.
he's saying this, and I believe what he's saying. But what scares me even more is what he admitted on Joe Rogan's podcast a few days after this 5-minute video comes out. He said that there were multiple members of the Biden White House who would call up members of the Meta team and scream into the phone. Those were his words, to censor anything related to COVID, anything related to the Hunter Biden story, but with COVID especially. They said any post that even suggests that vaccines have side effects, you need to take off the internet.
So what happens if he said no?
So he said, I didn't know what to do, basically, and ultimately we ended up doing it because we were scared.
All joking
because the
aside,
White House,
I would be too.
The White House threatened to basically shut down Meta and govern.
No. Forget shutting down, dude.
Well, take
I'm
away
talking
this
about
huge
eating a meal and
platform.
just dropping dead because somebody poisoned you. And
It's horrifying. I mean, probably people died. I'm going to go so far as to say people definitely died.
100%.
Because
If you
we
get in the
couldn't
way
have
of
an
somebody's
honest
money,
conversation about this. That scares me because that's just one phone call to one guy. How much worse is the damage from the last 4 years that we don't even know about? It's just now starting to come to the surface. And for me, the answer is always, always, always more competition in the market and more speech. And I'm really concerned with all of a sudden everyone in the government from both parties who can't agree on what the definition of a woman is, all of a sudden agreeing that TikTok is this huge threat to our society and we have to get rid of it, when we know every American company, they've been censored. They've been controlling, essentially. We live in a governance police state now. That's not how we're supposed to live as Americans, and I have a very
Trump,
uneasy
overturn
feeling.
that or no?
It's very complicated. So the law says if the Supreme Court doesn't say the ban is wrong, and that's what we're waiting to hear right now.
Do you think they are going to ban it?
I don't know, and I'm hopeful they don't. I go back and forth on this every day. It's all going to come down to Supreme Court precedent, which I'll get back to in a second.
Do you think they're bought?
No.
So you think they're honest?
I think most
So
of
do
our
you think
justices,
they're weighing out
not
the
all
fact
of them,
that-
I think most of our justices are honest.
But do you think that they weighed out that Meta does that and that all these other platforms do that?
I think they're honestly having a conversation about it, but I think they're approaching it from a different lens because they're not supposed to interpret things politically. They're supposed to interpret constitutional law. So their scope of what they are allowed to consider is very, very limited.
Then why didn't they do that with all these other platforms? That's what my question is.
Well, none of those other questions have ever been brought before the Supreme Court, right? So the big difference is the Supreme Court takes less than 1% of all cases that ultimately make its way up to the Supreme Court every year. But in order to qualify as a Supreme Court case, it has to be a question of constitutional law. So ultimately, they're interpreting, did this law that get passed by Congress violate the United States Constitution? Yes or no? That is the only question that they are allowed to ask. They're not supposed to weigh the political implications of anything outside of the scope of that question. Sometimes that ends up getting brought in anyway because people are imperfect, but that's how SCOTUS was set up. So they're supposed to answer the question, did this law, under the guise of national security, violate the First Amendment rights in our Constitution for American citizens to freely express themselves? I would argue yes. And there's a Supreme Court case from the 1960s called Lamont v. Postmaster General. Basically, way back then, American citizens were seeking to receive propaganda, actual propaganda, from the then USSR, the Soviet Union, in their mailboxes. They wanted to see what Russia was saying to their citizens about America and basically what Russia was arguing for on the global stage. Then the federal government, via the post office, so the Postmaster General, who oversees the postal system, said that is a danger to national security. We cannot allow this because it undermines American interests. So we're going to prevent that mail from being delivered to your mailbox. That ended up going all the way up to the Supreme Court. And they said then in the 1960s that your First Amendment rights do not just protect what you say out loud, your ability to stand on the street corner and say whatever you want, with some restrictions, but mostly say whatever you want, free from government interference. First Amendment rights only count if you also have something called a right to receive. So that protects what you hear, what you read, what you engage with, what theoretically you repost.
This could save TikTok, though.
It could save TikTok. And I've been like screaming this old court case from the rooftops, praying a justice sees one of these videos, because you never know, or one of their clerks. But ultimately, it's the exact same argument today. It's not a pamphlet in your mailbox necessarily that the government is trying to prevent from being delivered to you. But that was a then national foreign adversary that undermined national security. But the government did not have the right to interfere in a person's ability to see that information anyway. If the government's argument is TikTok is a national security problem, the government cannot interfere with something that we as American citizens see from a foreign adversary. That's already been established constitutional law.
Who gives them the permission to take it away from us then? Like, can't we say, no, you can't take this away from us?
Well, laws that are unconstitutional get passed all the time. And then ultimately they get up to the Supreme Court. Supreme Court says that's unconstitutional. You can't do that. And that law gets thrown out. But that's a process. It takes a long time.
Is the Supreme Court more powerful than the president?
Oh, yeah. I actually think that's probably the biggest misconception people have about American politics, even from our own country. The way we teach civics is that the most powerful person on earth is the president of the United States. That's not how our system was intended to be set up, actually. The Supreme Court has a lot more power because ultimately they get to determine if everything the rest of the government is doing was lawful or not. But it takes a very long time to get there. It's a very, very scrupulous process to determine what questions they are even allowed to answer. And so people kind of brush them aside as less important.
What is the probability of so say they banned TikTok. What's the probability of them just changing their asset names?
Like TikTok selling to a different company or being
and then
different.
Just reestablishing
TikTok
itself.
has said we will not sell to another company as of this point. There are a couple of American entrepreneurs trying to put together the capital to buy TikTok, and they don't have any interest in selling, which I understand. I think it might be...
They're strong-arming them.
They are. They're strong-arming them. So if I'm a company owner, I'm going to say, no, I'm not going to sell my business just because a bunch of corrupt politicians told me I had to. That's ridiculous. But I also know that, there are millions of small businesses in the United States on TikTok. TikTok has a massive financial blow coming their way if they don't continue operating in the United States.
A lot. I mean, dude, us.
Yeah.
Us.
Yeah. Creators and all kinds of entrepreneurs.
I think if one goes down, one goes up. Vine went down, TikTok went up.
Yep.
And if TikTok goes down,
something will replace it.
But at the extent of what when it comes to freedom? That's the question.
In a market that has pretty much been dominated now by two companies that you can't really logistically compete in the market anymore.
Yeah.
It's Meta and Google who owns YouTube. Yeah. And that's it. I mean, how are you realistically going to start a new platform that honestly competes with them?
How is YouTube doing with their platforms when it comes to like censorship? Because they're aggressive.
They were bad. They were really bad, especially during COVID, about all of the COVID stuff. They haven't publicly admitted about the government calling them up to censor this stuff, but that's obviously what was happening.
When did they cool off?
I think, from my perspective anyway, they started to cool off on some of this stuff, depending on what you're talking about a year and a half ago.
That makes sense, because when the Andrew Tate episode went out, I was literally like, oh, this is going to it's going to go up for a few minutes and they're going to demonetize it and shut it down. Not only did it crush, but they never demonetized it.
Yep.
I couldn't believe it.
It was shocking.
I could not. I would post a vlog of me in the kitchen, like throwing eggs at my wife at the time, at my girlfriend.
Violence against
violence,
women.
you hate women.
No, it's so true. The stupidest things were getting flagged and taken down, and
Oh, they were ruthless, and I'm sure a lot of that came from the government, unfortunately.
I think it's competitiveness. I think if other companies keep competing with like, okay, well, you could come to us for freedom of speech, then they're gonna have to ease up. I don't think Meta wanted to like get involved with the political realm, but once they got involved and they realized how many people looked at them like, no, we don't respect you because you're harming us.
Yep.
I think they were kind of like, well, dude, it's might as well have the ship go down with people respecting us than us being strong-armed by the government and people hating us. When, to be honest, like he said something that kind of did resonate with me. When he's on Joe Rogan, he says, anybody who creates a social media platform obviously loves public speech. Like you don't
would
create,
think, yeah.
You don't create a platform for everybody to go post what they believe and what they do if you don't believe in that. And
I said the same thing this week. You know, a lot of conservatives in particular cite TikTok as being so anti-conservative and anti-conservative values. And that was true at one point. I mean, I had my account permanently suspended like 7 times. I called it the Lazarus of TikTok accounts at one point because every time I challenged it, it would just come back from the dead, which was great. And a lot of people
That's crazy.
ran into that. Charlie Kirk's account was shut down like 20 times before I finally convinced him to try it just one more time. But about 2 years ago, they decided, not because the government was pressuring them to, but because that's where their community was at. Hey, we really went too far. We messed up on this. And there has been one platform over the last year and a half or so that has regularly picked up the phone to call me and to call other conservative creators to say, we want you to know you have a home on this platform. Your content matters. We want more creators like you. What can we do to make this better for you? And that's been TikTok. And I think ultimately, people are shocked to hear that all the time. I'm going to an event with TikTok next weekend in DC.
Do you know I can't even monetize on TikTok?
Oh, there's issues there. We'll talk after the podcast, which will be good.
Yeah,
but
no, and
they really are trying, I think, to be a free speech platform. And I have to give them credit for that. I do.
I would love to talk to somebody there.
Absolutely. And they really are like passionate about this, really passionate about this.
They always take down my my biblical things too. And I don't understand that because I'm not even saying anything that's like, well, I guess technically it would go against what they believe in. But yeah,
no,
I'd love
because Jessica just told us that China is now one of the biggest countries of Christians.
Well, not because of the government. It's just by sheer population more than anything. I did see that this week, which was very cool.
That helps.
But you're right. It was competition, ultimately. Meta was under no legal obligation to change all of their policies and say, okay, we're going to be a free speech platform now. TikTok did it, which is their main competitor.
And so they have to do it.
they have to do it.
So this is my theory. Ready? You don't have to serve their God, but you could serve them to their God. So, for example, our God is Christ. Their God is money. So if you take their money away from them, if you take their power away from them, they will bow their knees to their God, which means they're less scared of the government than they are going bankrupt. So my mom used to always tell me, she goes, don't give them any press. Don't give them any opinions. Don't. And a lot of people get mad at me because they go, why don't you speak about this? Why don't you speak about that? I'm like, because I won't give it attention.
Yep.
Me not speaking about it does it more harm than me speaking about it. And to be honest, I already speak about Christ so much, so it's like I don't want to be that guy. That's
that's true.
Like, but do you know what? This was such an unbelievable conversation, and I would love to do this again.
Absolutely. Thank you guys so much for having me. And truly, I don't think you quite understand the difference you're making to bring people to their faith and to help our country answer these bigger questions about who we are and what we believe in. But your impact is astronomical. And I see that. I watch all of your content religiously. Literally, we love it at my house. And I hear your name more often than anyone else from young men when I speak on high school and college campuses about the content that has made a difference in their life. So kudos to you guys. And cheering you on every step of the way.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so
We're really
much.
excited. We're going to be taking this on the road. We're going live.
Exciting.
Yeah. And, it's all glory to God again. But this year, season 3, I want to see their faces. Because like when I meet people and they tell me their stories about how they listen to the podcast and how it changed their opinions on things. And I just can't, have you ever performed live?
Yeah.
With the Turning Point stuff? Turning Point is what made me push to go do like live things because comments are cool, but when I'm done and I get to hug these people and look them in their eyes and see the impact, it's a blessing. So thank you so much for saying that. It means a lot to me.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for being here. And God willing, we get to chop it up very, very soon.
Heck yeah.
Thank you.